Hi, I'm Kim Santini. Today I'm going to show you how to take some basic collage material and create something really fantastic and brand new in your journals. See the mess behind me? Why don't you grab your own goodies, your journal, some magazines, and let's get started on piecing together some pages. All right, let's go over our supplies here. You're going to need, of course, your journal, and I'm working in my Ranger Mixed Media Journal. You're going to want some printed material. I perused a couple of magazines, and also I have a little collection of bits and pieces of things whose patterns have thrilled me over the years. So you're going to need some printed material. You're going to need an adhesive. I happen to be using acrylic matte medium as my adhesive, but you could use Elmer's glue or any kind of paste or even a glue stick if you want. You're going to need a tool to apply that. I just have an old paintbrush here. And you're going to want a little bit of water. I have a spray bottle here, but you could also just have a bowl of water if you wanted, and a pair of scissors. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is go through your magazines or your printed material and collect or gather imagery that feels intriguing to you. So for me, the trick that I use is as I'm paging through the magazines, if I see something that makes my eye stop, I just rip the page out and I keep going. So I apologize. I know there's glare on some of these pages. But if I see something, I'm not really trying to process what the actual photograph entails, but like in this instance, I love this pattern here, this random patterning that's happening in this textile or blanket that's getting whipped or shaken out. And in this image, I really love all the green, the various greens and the patterning that's happening down here. I didn't even notice there was a little dog in there until after I tore it out. And I also love this pattern of the satin or velvet on the gown. So, just grabbing colors or textures or shapes that really intrigue you, this knitted sleeve. And you're gonna have a whole stack of these, and then you're going to use your scissors and you're just gonna cut out the sections that you really like. So don't worry about the size or the shape even of what you cut, but you want to reduce the pages that you pulled out to just include the things in them that intrigue you. Now, once you've trimmed all of your pieces, you end up having a pile of various sorts of patterns and colors. The individual pieces or the bits that intrigued you stand out just for their pure intriguing allure on their own and not necessarily as part of something bigger. And now is the fun part where you get to move through these bits and pieces that you have cut out and create entirely new collages or stories just using the bits that you love. So, play with positioning things in different ways. Maybe even consider cutting a piece into something smaller. Play with the juxtaposition of things. I love this burgundy with this deep gold here. Let's see, I have some more gold here. So this would be a nice counterpoint. And you want to put things together, combine like at least 3 elements, and audition different bits and pieces and play with them and see what comes up. And just continue to move your collage bits around as you come up with new designs. Now, when you find a design that you really like or a combination that you really like, audition or play with moving things about, maybe trimming. Think about where shapes end and new shapes begin. For instance, when I'm looking at the interplay between these two shapes here, these two pieces of paper, one is a little bit narrower than the other. And I feel like I might want that edge straightened out, or I might want this top edge to be particularly clean, and then leave that little jag there and play off of that with a balanced or a counterpoint jag down here at the bottom. The other thing that you might want to do, if after you've figured out your final layout, is to use your cell phone to take a photograph of the layout on your page, and maybe even grab a pencil if you have one handy and mark some of the corners of your page, or where the pieces are going to get lined up or placed down. Maybe just put some dots on your page to indicate that, so that when it comes time to gluing things down, you will be able to reassemble. And then the other thing that you want to do before you start to glue is to deconstruct by pulling your topmost piece off, continuing that process until you get to your bottommost piece, and that is going to be the first one that you glue down. So actually, I'm going to put a couple little more corner marks here so that I know exactly where to put this piece. And now I'm ready to glue. Now, before I glue, I want to get this page or this piece of paper a little bit damp. Now, printed paper, printed material has a sizing on it, or it has a coating. And often when we go to glue it down, perhaps you've experienced this, you get like a ripply effect in the paper itself as it unevenly soaks up moisture from the glue. And one way to eliminate this is to actually get your paper a little damp before you glue it down. And I'm going to do that just by spritzing this with some water. I'm going to do it off camera so that I don't get my page itself wet. But you'll notice when I bring this page back, or when I bring this piece back, now it's already started to curl on its own. And that's going to be a really great asset for me when I put my glue down. Now I'm inverting this because I want to apply the glue to the back side of my paper here. And again, I'm using matte medium. And I just squirt it directly on my page, and I'm spreading that medium or product around on the back side of the page. And I have a good amount of it here, probably actually more than I need, but that's okay. Better too much than not enough, I guess. I could have been a little bit more prudent with that. And now I'm going to carefully flip this over, and I'm going to line it up on the top, line it up with my little pencil marks, and put it down here. Now, getting it wet also allowed some of that print from the underside to come through, but I'm okay with that. And I'm going to use this excess product to glue this down or press it down so I get a nice clean connection with my page. And now I'm ready for the next one. Now this one, because I really like the isolated figure, and there is a little bit of print on the background, I don't necessarily want that to show through, so I'm going to try to glue it down without the water. Let's see what happens. I'm going to put my product on here, and then I'm going to brush this. Now, if you're super messy or you're uncertain about how much glue to put on your paper, you may want to have a separate like placemat or piece of plastic, an area where you can apply your glue and not have it get all over your page like what's happening here. I want to line this up so it's nice and clean, and this corner lines up with that. Then I'm going to come back in here with my paintbrush and apply some pressure as I glue this down. I think this paper was just about the right size that I could get down without it wrinkling. And there's something really interesting that's happening right here where it overlaps with the other one. There's some translucency happening. I find that intriguing. Now this next piece is going to get laid on so that I want that little girl's face. I want her to be peering out. And I do have this little marker right here, but I think I want to drop it just down just a tiny bit more than my mark so that I can see her nose. Oh, I forgot to spray this one, didn't I? I was so excited to glue it down. So there you have it. That sometimes I get so caught up in what I'm doing that I forget to follow best practices. We all get that way, don't we? I'm probably not getting as much of a curl or a warp or ripple to my paper because my glue that I'm using, or my adhesive, is pretty wet. And it might be different, or I imagine it would be different if my adhesive was thicker. But look, I say that, and now I'm getting some right down here at the bottom. All right. And now it's time for the last piece. Put a little bit of product on the underside of it. And I am going to spread that glue around. And now let's line this up using our little markers. And here we go. Look at how quick and easy this was to put this page together with just a few pieces of collage. And now I've created this really interesting page when it's dry. There's going to be this really fascinating sort of interplay between these shapes, and they will inspire me to do something new. Now I'm going to rebuild this one. It got jiggled a little bit when I moved it off the surface of my book. I'm going to put this on the adjacent page. Now, the first one that I did was primarily cut edges or straight edges. Some of your pages may have torn edges, like this. This has a torn edge that's not perfectly straight. So feel free to experiment or audition different types of edges on your cut pieces. Just because mine are all nice and even doesn't mean that yours have to be. And additionally, play with different shapes. Feel free to cut, I could choose to cut this little triangle out. I could choose to, or could have chosen to isolate a particular rose and cut that out and place it somewhere as its own shape. Don't, just because I'm all rectilinear doesn't mean that you need to be also. And as you're laying out your adjacent page, if you choose to do a spread like this, don't just look at the relationship of these shapes to each other and the cohesiveness of them on this page, but also play with the conversation that could be happening or starting over here. as they go back and forth. So you'll notice I aligned this top edge up to meet the top edge here. That creates a nice conversation that's happening between the two. And I also kind of grouped it from a design standpoint in a similar way with a larger rectangle and then a smaller one that's sort of a dongle or hanging off the bottom edge. So these are very similar in concept as far as the basic design element goes, but also different. And there's going to be some interesting things that happen as a result of that. So a couple things that I want to point out. Pay attention to the sort of glue that you're using. Because I used a matte medium and I put it over top of my whole collage, not just underneath the pieces that I was gluing together, that's going to alter the whole surface of the image or the page. It's going to turn the whole page into a matte surface. And I like that matte surface because that will give me a little bit of traction if I want to come in with another tool and perhaps draw over top of this in some areas. Not sure that I'm going to do that yet, but it does give me the flexibility if I want to do that. Whereas if I were using something like a gloss medium or Elmer's glue and I was putting it on the underside as well as on the top of the images, that glossy surface would prevent me from being able to add many things, many more marks other than tools such as a Sharpie. All right. And I also want to show you some of these other pages that I have done on loose cardstock. And I use these for all sorts of different inspiration points when I'm working in abstract paintings. If you have been following me on social media, you may know that this has been my summer of abstraction, where I am exploring how far or how abstract I can take things like the landscape and botanical elements. And these kinds of sheets that I have created using the process that I just shared with you are ways for me to play with removing recognizable objects like a walkway from its own context and creating an entirely new composition or design just based on the rhythm or other elements inside or inherent in that particular photo. And also, by virtue of extracting just the things that fascinate me the most from the images, then that means when I'm looking at these pages, I'm automatically confronted with things that delight me. And the juxtaposition of the delights is giving me the opportunity to explore different kinds of mark making and combinations of marks and shapes that I maybe wouldn't consider otherwise. And some of these, I also began to think about the page itself as a finished design and added things purely, I talked about thinking about the shapes of what you were cutting and placing down, adding those shapes down purely for the aesthetic of the page itself and adding a bit more visual interest, but also collisions between these patterns and rhythm. And some of these you may feel or may also see that they have a figurative feel to them as well. So you could use this process to construct a figure or any sort of recognizable shape that you like. It really has so much different flexibility and application with regard to what you choose to create from the little bits that you've cut out. So what comes next? Well, I'm going to let these pages dry, and then I may choose to embellish them in some way. I want to remind you that a page is never finished and, never ever finished. Even though I sat down and just put these in here, doesn't mean that they're completely done. I also want to mention that I did reach out and get some plastic to put between this page and the underside of it, because this is canvas. And I realized as I settled in to glue it down that that glue might bleed through the canvas, and I can see that it really has. So having that isolation of the plastic here will keep this page from adhering to the one underneath it. But because this page is fabric, I can see myself adding stitching or perhaps a perimeter of beadwork playing off of, you know, these patterns that I see here. It would be really lovely to have some sort of embellishment along this edge, maybe even some fringe to go with this lovely ruffled satin here. I could press some flowers and add a pressed flower as a collage element over here. There's all sorts of different jumping off points that will inspire me to add additional marks in some capacity to this spread. So I want to encourage you to do the same, and even think about too with regards of with choosing the page that you're going to put your marks on, or your collage on. Perhaps you want to collage on a page that already has some marks on it and add your collage as an embellishment on a page that already exists. So all sorts of different ways that you can run with this approach and make it your own. But I am really, really excited to see what you do with this. Have fun journaling, and feel free to tag Art SOJOURNaling with any imagery that you share on social media so that I can check it out too. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful session working in your journal.